You have no teeth left, not one. It's 1.77 million years ago in the mountains of what is now the Republic of Georgia. You can't chew meat. You can't chew roots. You can't process a single piece of raw food on your own. By every rule of survival on this planet, you should have starved to death the moment your last tooth fell out. And yet here you are, still alive, years later. Here's the part that should genuinely bother you. Someone had to feed you every day for years. Someone had to soften your food, or chew it first, or find you things soft enough to gum down without teeth in a world with no hospitals, no soft food processors, no blender, no soup, no concept of retirement, just other people, deciding over and over again that keeping you alive was worth the effort. No pension plan, no nursing home, no one bringing you a smoothie because your teeth fell out. Just other early humans apparently doing this on purpose. This isn't a story about Homo sapiens, this is Homo erectus, your ancestors' ancestors' ancestors. Roughly 1.7 million years before anyone invented a written word, a group of early humans looked at one of their own who could no longer contribute anything physically useful and chose to carry him anyway. So today we're answering the question nobody actually teaches you. What actually happened when ancient humans got old? Not life was nasty, brutish, and short. The lazy answer you've heard 100 times. The actual why. Who made it to old age? How? And what happened to them once they got there? By the end of this video, you're never going to hear the phrase average lifespan of 30 the same way again. Let's start by clearing up the biggest myth in this entire topic. You've heard this statistic 100 times. Ancient humans had an average lifespan of around 30 years. It gets repeated constantly, usually to imply that anyone who made it to 40 was some kind of freak of nature, staggering around like a walking miracle. Here's the problem. That number is technically true and almost completely misleading, and the reason why is one of the most common statistical traps in all of history. Average life expectancy at birth doesn't mean people were dropping dead in their 30s. It means infant and child mortality was catastrophic. A huge percentage of people died before the age of 5. And that single fact drags the entire average down hard. If you have 10 people, 5 of whom die as infants, and 5 of whom live to 70, your average lifespan is 35. Nobody in that group actually died at 35. Nobody. Paleodemographers, researchers who study population patterns in ancient skeletal remains, have shown repeatedly that if you survive childhood in the deep past, your odds of reaching your 60s, 70s, or beyond were far better than the 30-year lifespan number implies. Researchers Michael Gervin and Hillard Kaplan pulled together mortality data across multiple modern hunter-gatherer populations, groups living the closest thing available today to an ancient pre-agricultural lifestyle, and found that once someone survived to age 15, their most common age at death, statistically, landed somewhere in their late 60s to 70s. Not 30, not close to 30. Old age wasn't some evolutionary impossibility. It was a genuine, achievable, and, as you're about to see, actively supported outcome. Which brings us back to that toothless skull in the mountains. The fossil is officially called Dmanisi skull 4, sometimes nicknamed the Toothless Old Man, discovered at the Dmanisi archaeological site in the Republic of Georgia. Researchers led by paleoanthropologist David Lord Kipanidze examined the jaw and found something remarkable. Nearly every tooth socket had fully healed over. Not recently lost. Healed. Which means this individual survived for years. Some researchers estimate at least 2 years, possibly considerably longer, after losing the ability to chew solid food entirely. Think about what that actually requires. No teeth means no meat you can tear on your own, no tough roots, no raw plant fiber. In virtually every other case in the animal kingdom, this is a death sentence within days or weeks. There is no toothless but thriving lion. There is no toothless but thriving wolf. But this individual lived, which means someone else was doing the work, softening food, pre-chewing it, finding or preparing something this person could actually eat day after day, for years, with zero possibility of the favor ever being returned in any physically useful way. And here's the detail that should really land. This is Homo erectus, not modern humans, not even Neanderthals, a species that existed roughly 1.9 million to 100,000 years ago, with a brain about 2/3 the size of yours. Whatever this behavior was, call it care, call it group loyalty, call it something we don't even have a clean word for yet, it was already running in the human lineage long before anyone who looked anything like you existed. The Dmanisi site itself makes this even stranger. It's the oldest confirmed evidence of early humans living outside Africa, and the groups there appear to have been small. A handful of individuals, not some sprawling settlement with food to spare. Every mouth in a group that size mattered to the group's survival math, and they still fed this one. This wasn't a one-time fluke either. Fast forward to roughly 45,000 years ago, in what's now Shanidar Cave in Iraq. Researchers excavating there found the remains of a Neanderthal man archaeologist nicknamed Shanidar I, informally Nandy. His skeleton reads like a catalog of catastrophe. Blind in one eye, a withered, partially amputated right arm, unusable for years before death. Severe arthritis throughout his joints, hearing loss consistent with significant deafness. Researcher Eric Trinkhaus, who studied the remains extensively, estimated Nandy lived to somewhere around 40 to 50 years old. Genuinely old for a Neanderthal, and almost unthinkably old for someone with that level of physical disability in a world with stone tools and no medicine. He could not have hunted. He could not have effectively defended himself. In almost any framing of survival of the fittest you've ever half remembered from a textbook, Nandy should not have made it past his first serious injury, let alone to old age carrying half a dozen of them. There's genuine scholarly debate about exactly what this means. Some researchers, like Penny Spickens, have argued this is direct evidence of deep, sustained compassion in Neanderthal social groups. Care extended over years with no expectation of physical repayment. Others push back and argue survival, like this doesn't necessarily require altruism in the way we define it today. It could reflect practical group cohesion, shared parenting structures, or simply small, tight-knit bands where abandoning anyone carried its own social cost. Whichever explanation you find more convincing, the physical fact doesn't change. Someone or some group carried this man's full weight, literally and figuratively, for years, in one of the harshest environments early humans ever lived in. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because there isn't just one explanation for why evolution would favor investing in people who can no longer hunt, fight, or reproduce. There are competing theories, and this is where the real payoff of the video is. Theory 1, the grandmother hypothesis. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes, through decades of fieldwork with modern hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, proposed that human females evolved an unusually long post-menopausal lifespan, specifically because older women who could no longer have children of their own were enormously valuable helping to raise their grandchildren, gathering food, sharing knowledge, freeing up younger mothers to have more children sooner. In Hawkes' own field observations, older Hadza women routinely spent hours each day digging up tubers too tough for young children to extract themselves, then handed that food directly to their grandchildren, measurably boosting how quickly the next child could be weaned and how soon the mother could become pregnant again. Humans are one of the only species on Earth where females routinely live for decades after their reproductive years end. That's not an accident. According to this theory, it's the entire point. Theory 2, the patriarch hypothesis. A competing idea, argued by researchers including Kristen Hawkes herself, in later work alongside colleagues, suggests older men remained reproductively and socially valuable far longer than assumed. Not through physical labor, but through accumulated knowledge, social status, and the ability to keep fathering children into advanced age, which would also favor a longer overall lifespan for men. Theory 3, the longevity revolution. This is the one with the most striking hard data behind it. Researchers Rachel Kaspari and Sang-Hee Lee examined tooth wear patterns across hundreds of fossil hominin remains to estimate age at death across different time periods. What they found was startling. Going into the Upper Paleolithic, roughly 30,000 years ago, the ratio of old adults, grandparent-aged individuals, to younger adults spiked dramatically, roughly doubling compared to earlier populations, including compared to Neanderthals living in the same general era. And that spike lines up almost exactly with an explosion in complex tools, art, long-distance trade networks, and cultural sophistication. Kaspari and Lee's interpretation is bold but compelling. More surviving grandparents may have meant more accumulated knowledge being actively transmitted across generations. Skills, stories, warnings, techniques. At a scale that simply wasn't possible when almost nobody lived long enough to become a grandparent in the first place. Put plainly, your species may not have gotten smarter first and then started living longer as a result. It may have started living longer first, and that's what allowed it to get smarter. So if you made it to old age in the deep past, what did your life actually look like? Not a rocking chair, not retirement. In small hunter-gatherer bands, there was no concept of someone being fully removed from contribution. But the type of contribution shifted. Elders became the tool makers, the child care specialists, the keepers of which plants were poisonous, which water sources dried up in drought years, which routes to take when the usual one flooded. In a species with no writing for the overwhelming majority of its history, a single elder was, quite literally, a walking archive. Lose that person before they'd pass their knowledge on, and you didn't just lose a relative, you lost information the entire group might never recover. Sometimes information that meant the difference between a group surviving a bad season or not. Some researchers studying Upper Paleolithic cave art sites have even pointed out that the most technically skilled painted panels, the ones requiring the steadiest hand and the deepest understanding of the cave's natural contours, often show signs of being reworked and refined over years, consistent with the kind of accumulated mastery you'd expect from an experienced older artisan teaching or correcting younger ones, not a single one-off effort. That's a genuinely different way of thinking about why an aging, physically slower group member might have been worth protecting even in lean times. It's not sentiment layered on top of survival logic. In a very real sense, for early humans, it may have been survival logic. Here's where the story gets harder, because it would be dishonest to make this sound like every ancient society treated its elderly with universal, guaranteed reverence. You've probably heard some version of the claim that ancient or primitive societies routinely abandoned or even killed their elderly the moment resources ran short, left behind in the snow, deserted on the trail, whatever the specific version you heard was. This idea shows up constantly in old anthropology books, pop history, and casual conversation. Here's the more accurate, more careful picture. Most contemporary anthropologists now view these accounts as rare, extreme, absolute last resort responses to genuine famine or crisis conditions, not a routine or accepted cultural practice. Many of the older written accounts that popularized this idea came from outside observers with limited context, working from secondhand stories, sometimes decades removed from the events they were describing, and modern scholarship treats a lot of that older material with real skepticism. The honest version of this story isn't ancient people were casually brutal toward their elders. It's closer to the opposite. The archaeological record, Dmanisi, Shanidar, and dozens of similar finds since consistently shows societies choosing to shoulder enormous, sustained costs to keep aging and disabled members alive in conditions that would have made abandonment the objectively easier choice every single time. The fact that they didn't take that easier path over and over again across hundreds of thousands of years and multiple different human species is the actual finding here. Old age in prehistory wasn't rare because people didn't survive to it. It was rare because it was expensive, and your ancestors kept paying that cost anyway. So let's go back to that toothless skull in the mountains of Georgia 1.77 million years ago. He wasn't a burden someone forgot to leave behind. He was the result of a decision made and remade every single day for years by people with every practical reason to walk away and none of the modern comforts that make caregiving easy. Every grandparent who ever taught you something, every elder who ever passed down a story, a warning, or a skill instead of taking it to the grave with them, that entire chain, stretching back well over 1,000,000 years, only exists because somewhere, repeatedly, across an almost incomprehensible span of time, someone decided an old, worn-out body was still worth feeding. Turns out the brutal, short, nasty version of ancient life you were taught might be missing the single most human detail in the whole story. If this messed with your head a little, subscribe, because next time we're going somewhere even weirder.